Hello and welcome. Heading into week 617, I think, of this ZenQuiltz U.S. state block journey that I've been on since the beginning of this year. And this week we're heading into New York. So I'm eliminating the light gray micron this week because our palette is really pretty dark. So we're going to need to stick right with that dark gray. And no need for kneaded erasers or erasers this week because again, we're going dark. So using each one of those strings as our actual design. All right. So here's the part that we hate the most, creating that string and building our block. So if you've been on this journey with me, you'll know that each block begins with a 3/16 inch border around each edge of our tile. And that's just creating a uniformity so that as we put these blocks together into our big picture, we have some commonality, something that brings all the visions together into one big quilt. Yeah. As I go through the process, just picking tangles that kind of relate in some way, shape, or form to each state that we're doing. All right, so we have our border all set up, and for the moment, we're only going to be operating or marking up the right side of this tile. So I'm going to turn my tile to the side, knowing that I'm only going to be adding hash marks to the right side of this tile. So every 6 lines and a space, so 6.5 lines, we're going to be adding a hash mark. So every 6.5 lines on our ruler. So the space between the 6th and 7th line is where we're adding a hash. Which will give us 7 hash marks and 8 spaces. Okay. So now that we have these hash marks on the right side of our tile, we're going to go turning our tile back so that the hash marks are on the right. We're going to go to the top left and we're going to add a square that meets this third hash mark. So we're going to go down to 1 1/8 and add a hash mark to the left side. So 1 1/8 hash mark to the left. And then we're going to turn our tile back so that our hash marks are on the right and we have a horizontal hash on that 1 1/8 line. So now that we're in this position, we're going to go ahead and line up our ruler, again, not using the edge of our tile, but the edge of our border, and we're going to do the same thing vertically. So 1 1/8, just a little hash into that space. So where we have those two hash marks from side to side, we're going to go ahead and connect them with a line that goes from borderline to borderline. And then I'm going to continue lining up my ruler and filling in the remaining rows using those hash marks that we connected or laid down on the right. Okay. So now we have this bottom section all filled with our rows. And I'm going to take the hash mark that we made vertically at our 1 1/8, and I'm going to connect that top to bottom to create a square in the top left corner. And now I'm going to take those remaining hashes and connect just to that square. So visually, you should be seeing something that looks like a flag. This week's pattern comes from the Cobble Hill U.S. State Block Quilt Puzzle, not the Workbasket book. All right, so there we have it. We're all strung up. And this week, once again, we're going to go to our tangling first. Because our colors are so dark, we're going to go ahead and outline our borders again and pull those in with our blender. Of course, if you want to use your acetate or any other technique, by all means, perfect. All right. So we're heading into our tangles for New York, and we're going to use each one of these, we'll call them stripes because this is now a flag. Every other one of the stripes is going to get one tangle, and every opposite or every other is going to get another. So we're headed to New York. There was a ton of stuff that I could pull for the state of New York. So the first thing that we're going to honor is the state nickname, the Empire State, which also has, of course, a state building as well, Empire State Building. All right, so here we go. Empire, I'm going to start about halfway up my line, maybe 3/4 of the way up my line, and I'm going to create a V. Now, as you're going through this, those V's are going to kind of arch down instead of just coming straight down. We're going to arch them side to side, and I'm going to work my way all the way across that stripe, creating these connected arched V's. And once I have those arched V's, I'm going to create an arch from the left side of the V to the right side of the V. And I'm going to come just short-ish of that top line so that I have enough space to work with in this tiny little space for details, but I'm also not losing my details in my stitching. And I didn't actually do as I said. I did what was comfortable to my hand, which was going all the way to the top. Whatever, it always all works out, right? Not going to sweat it. So again, every other row, I'm going to just enjoy the process of creating these beautiful arched V's from side to side, and they don't need to line up to what's above, right? Because we're going to have space in between there, and you're not going to know whether it lines up. And also remember, we have a scissors in our hand, not a pen. So as we're creating this fabric, we may or may not be cutting at the same place on that fabric each time. So just drop those shoulders down away from your ears. Take that breath, working your way across the line. Finding the magic in that repetition. In true Zentangle fashion, this pattern isn't done. I just wanted the repetition of being able to fill this in to each stripe. Okay, so now that we have these kind of cone-shaped expressions, we're going to add some detail in there. So I'm going to offer an arch and a V to each one of those cones. So an arch across the bottom and a V in the center-ish of the top. So many options for tangles in New York. And of course, Empire had to make the cut. But we had options of Liberty for the Statue of Liberty. Okay, so the next detail into this space is adding ray lines that kind of arc to either side of that now divided space in the top. So right aside of each one of those V's that we added to the top, we're going to arch a line down to the base. So 3 lines on either side of that V, filling in that cone shape left to right, and then just adding a little line weight as you go to ground those lines onto that outside arch. 3 arched lines, filling in that arch across the top, grounding those lines, welding them onto that outside arch. one step at a time, one stroke at a time. We're filling these beautiful empire expressions into our New York. Taking your time, just enjoying the process. So, other points of interest in New York, of course, Times Square, where the ball drops every year for the new year. Wall Street. We have Central Park. So many options, so many directions we could have gone, filling in this flag block for this week. For those big tanglers like myself, this is a little bit tedious. For you micro tanglers, you're like, it's about time she tangles small. When I first strung this up in the pattern, there were 8 stripes, and I tried to only do 4 so I'd have more space to tangle, and it just didn't look very nice, almost kindergarten-esque. So back to 8 sections we went, and we'll just enjoy the process and breathe our way through these tiny spaces. Giving yourself a breath, dropping those shoulders down away from your ears. Great. So, in its truest step out, in this space down below, in these V's that are left over, there are kissing mucas underneath this arch. I will show you the step out as it exists. And if you can squeeze it on in there, that's great. If not, we can vamp and come up with something else to fill this space or nothing at all. But in its truest form, there is a muka that comes off the side of this bottom arch or bottom V, left side of the V, up around into that point that's formed by the arch and the rest of that V, and then one that goes the opposite direction. A girl after my own heart, squeezing muka wherever you can go with it. But this one might be a stretch for as small as we're going, but never pass up an opportunity to use muka if it fits for you. So I'm just going to go ahead and roll with it. And if this doesn't speak to you and you can't, or you just can't get that size in there to fit, go ahead and create your own little filler as you see this empire happening on your flag or your block, I guess I should say. Once your hand gets the flow of that space, they kind of fill in pretty quickly. Just tucking that head right into that corner. I guess in actuality, these mukas aren't really kissing, they kiss from the front. These guys have their backs towards each other. So there we have our empire for the Empire State. Pretty cool. We have choices. We can leave these spaces as kind of just being white spaces and aura inside just to kind of break up some of that white space and define it. Or you can go through and add another row of those empires. So right here is your arch that you would be filling in with those fans. I'm just going to go through and aura that space because I don't want it to get too busy and sloppy as we begin adding more details. Totally a personal choice, of course. And actually, maybe I'll add just a little bit of drama into the base of that aura and bring some depth into those stripes. So that white space you can view however you see it happening on your block or your fabric, right? The joy of creating our own fabric for these quilts is we can do whatever speaks to us, right? Always inspired by me, created by you. So whatever your creative voice is suggesting that you do, listen to it and follow that voice. Okay, nice. We can already see that flag vision coming together. And we have these alternating stripes that need a little loving. So what we're going to add into that space is the Tangle Broadway. Of course, Broadway shows, it's the theater district, um, musicals and all of that fun stuff. So I didn't want something busy. I wanted something a bit more straight lined and not in competition to what we've already laid inside of those stripes. So Broadway is the direction that I went. So in Broadway, we're going to take this space and add 5 lines. So you can definitely grab your ruler if you want the perfection of this, but I'm just going to allow myself grace and deliberately, slowly, and intentionally add 5 lines across this channel. So now that we have those 5 lines laid, actually, I'm going to go ahead and lay the 5 lines in each channel, just the same as we did with our empire, and kind of keep that flow. Pulling in whatever direction feels more comfortable to you. Do you get a smoother flow if you pull towards you, away from you, right, left, right? When you're adding those lines, one way is going to be much smoother and speak to you in a completely different way than any other way. And if you're using your ruler, you can just zip right through this and not be mindful to those lines really at all. Whatever works for you. So, in essence, what we've just created into these 4 spaces is our music ledgers, our sheets of music that we're going to be using for Broadway. So, now that we have these staffs or whatever they're called, I'm sorry, um, we're going to add the notes or the structure of the music. So, our ultimate goal as we go through this tangle is to either be above or below the line as we create the dips and structure of our Broadway. So let me show you what I mean. I'm going to go right above that top line, scoot down, and as I get below a line, I'm going to continue to build these blocks that ultimately fall above and below those lines that we created. So just ever so slightly, structured straight lines vertically and horizontally, being mindful where they end. And they don't always have to come back down to the bottom, right? We're building our musical notes that are flowing across our staff. So right now it almost looks like maybe a cityscape or something of that nature. But I'm going to stop and pause and show you what our next step is so you know what I mean when I say we only want to go above and below a line, and there's a reason why. So now that we've gone above the line and below the line, we're going to take our ink and ink that space above and below that line, creating our little connections from one note to another. So if my memory serves me correctly, this would be considered almost like an eighth note style, where two notes are connected together with a flag in between. So that's the reason why we're using that above below spacing as we meander this line across our tile or our stripe. So there we have Broadway, a great contradiction to that very foofy empire, now toning it back, adding the simplicity of those lines and just a little bit of ink to marry into the potential of that ink that we've added above to fill in that blank space. And if not, all good, right? Whatever you did is perfect. So we're just going to kind of continue filling in our staffs with these blocky straight lines, being mindful that they're coming just above or just below a line. And they can be as thick or as thin as you see them, right? They don't all have to be uniform and the same spacing. And the more your line is uneven and not so uniform, the more that music just kind of flows across that stripe. Doing this Broadway tangle, it's taking me to the opportunity I've had to go to many Broadway shows. But I remember very distinctly, of course, my very first Broadway show. I was in 8th grade. That was a long time ago. And we went to see Cats. And although I'm not sure in looking back, I understood really what it was all about. I loved everything about going to the theater and at that time dressing up. I'm not sure that people really even dress up anymore to go. Um, but it was quite an experience that led to many, many more Broadway experiences throughout my life so far. Just fun times. I don't mind going to the city for a day and taking in all that the city has to offer, but I do love coming home to the country with land and water and trees and nature. We all have our things. For some, it's too quiet, right? That's what makes the world such a beautiful place. There's a place for everyone. An opportunity to do you wholeheartedly. Check in on that breath and notice, is it different from where you started? I venture to guess it is. Here we have it. We have our empire, our Broadway. You can just see that music floating across our page so beautifully. All right. So we have one more open box to add some love into, and we're going to add some apicore in there for the state fruit, which is the apple. So we're going to kind of make our star of this flag the apicore. All right. So I'm going to kind of divide this box into four, starting in the center and working my way into the corners. And I'm not going to necessarily try to keep this real structured in that each one of my apicores is the same size and all of that fun stuff. Because if you know the Tangle apicore, they kind of grow organically, a little bit haphazardly, and it's difficult to get one to look like another. So I'm just going to add a little dot in the center-ish of my box. And I know that that's where I want each one of my apicores to begin. Now, keeping in mind that this box is cut from a different fabric, right? So all of these stripes are singularly cut and placed into the layout on our table as we're doing it right now, because everything is loose and kind of floating around and moving around and make sure it's right. We're kind of pinning it together. So if you go off the edge of this box with your apicore, it's okay, because that just means we um, cut through our pattern with the scissors, and we're human and we're doing this, you know, piece by piece, and a machine is not stitching this and all of that wonderful stuff to offer you grace and just be. Okay, so starting from this dot, I'm going to pull an arch up with a seed on the top of it. So a slight arch with a seed on the top. And then I'm going to come to the right side and I'm going to slightly arch and add a seed that touches the previous one. I'm going to go back to the beginning right at that dot, and I'm going to wrap another arch around the top and tuck a seed right into the valley of the two seeds below. Now I'm going to do the same thing to the right side, and this valley is where I'm headed. So arching up, adding a seed right into that valley. So now we have a four-petaled inside of our apple, but we need one more to create that star. So we're going to go back to the left side, right at the pinch at the bottom, arch around, and tuck once again right into that valley. So there is our star that we find on the inside of our apple. Now we can continue to build off of that, but for now I'm going to pause, turn my tile, and I'm going to go to the next corner. So starting with those same touching seeds from left and right, wrapping a seed around that connects in the center or the valley of those two seeds. Off to the right, another seed that drops into the valley, and then one more I'm going to use my go behind because it's going to be too tight here to pull off. So I'm going to pull off. Oops, I cut right through that strand of that apicore and tuck another seed right in on top. Again, same thing. Using your go behind as it makes sense to build each one of these connections into the valley previous. So there we have our apicore base, or the structure of our apicore um, for the star of our flag, if you will. And now I'm just going to go ahead and alternate arches to kind of fill in this white space. So you'll see I started here before I started talking. So I'm just going to complete this, and I'm just going to arch across. So always starting on that left side to begin, adding an additional arch that completes. And then I'm going to go to the right side. So these are going to just start piling up on top of themselves, right? And creating this almost betweed kind of expression happening just by building these arches to fill in that space. And if you have any space left over, you can twist once again, not twist, you can arch once again in the opposite direction just to fill up a bit more of that space. So there we have it, our tangles for New York. Okay, we could change that perspective and hold that tile out at arm's length and ooh and ah for what we've offered the state of New York. All right, so I'm going to go to that 515, that lighter blue option that we have. And with my blue and my blender, I'm going to fill in those empire spaces. So just taking the point of that marker right along the edge of my string line. So again, no need to use kneaded eraser or eraser this week because we're going to be using each one of those string lines to define. Make sure that your blender is clean from previous weeks and start in a circular motion, blending out those rough edges or sharp edges that we've just laid down along that stripe's edge, offering that beautiful highlight to that fabric in the center and the depth to the outside edge. And I'm going to do that to each empire using that, light blue option before we dig into those really deep, dark colors or bold colors of the other blue and red. If you're struggling to pull that color and manipulate that color, Your blender is probably a bit too dry to accomplish that blending. If you're still getting those really harsh straight lines just as you laid it down, your blender is probably time for retirement. You should get a beautiful blend in a circular motion that softens all of those edges and kind of just blends it into the center in that gorgeous highlighted visual. Wow. Just changing that perspective, seeing this all come together. So beautiful. I love seeing these patches or these blocks, I guess I should say, come together week after week, growing the patches of our quilt so colorfully. We have a border around each tile, and we're trying to stay in a similar color palette to also tie those blocks together. Every now and again, we offer a new little palette that we'll have to marry in somehow, some way, but for the moment, we're kind of sticking with what we have. Go ahead and make sure that blender is clean because we're headed into that 856, that real bright red, honoring the state flag in our New York expression, right? Or I should say the United State flag in that red, white, and blue. That light blue is kind of our offering of white, because I personally don't want any white material in my quilt. Always an option. I guess I totally should have said that before we colored all of that blue, that you definitely had an option. But you doing you allows you the opportunity for options always. So if you're just joining us on this journey, welcome. Some people are doing just the states that they've visited or lived in. Some people are here for the long haul, which I had a goal of completing in 2025, but I know that goal will fall short. So just offering myself grace and still enjoying the process as I share with you on those weeks that I'm able. Retreat season is coming up for me here. For those that don't know, I host retreats in my home, in my studio. Everyone is welcome. If you love to tangle, that's all I need to know. But anyway, retreat season is coming up. And so more than likely, I'll be taking a couple weeks off unless I surprise myself with my schedule and get things done ahead of time, which I'm not known for. So we'll see. Oh, this is looking so beautiful. There are definitely some blocks that I love, some blocks that are just eh. Um, but in either case, I've been enjoying the process, the sharing, and the blocks won't even be noticed when we put them all together into our large quilt. All right, so in that star box, I'm doing that deep 555, really bright, bold blue. So I'm gonna use just the tip of my brush so that I don't have too much of a palette laid that I really, in essence, don't see anything happening in this block. This color could get away from us really quickly. So just offering the tip of my brush into this box to lay my palette down, making sure that my red is off of my blender. And again, circular motion going right on in, softening that line, pulling it down into the center of that block. You always have the opportunity to add more ink, but it's not always as easy to tone down if you put too much, right? So just offering that palette lightly at first and then debating if you want to add something else. So just so I can show you what I mean if you want to add something else, I'm going to take that 555, that real dark blue, and I'm going to go directly with my blender to that marker, soaking up that marker directly into that blender, and that gives me the opportunity to expand that color further into that box, adding a bit more depth as you go and creating a deeper palette. Okay. So we have choices. Most of the time, I try to do my border so that my colors around the edge are not what I'm putting on the edge. Well, with this alternating stripe, I have my blue and my red and my dark blue all against my edge. So I kind of played with this a little bit and I alternated my material. And I didn't love it only because I had not done that before. So when I put my tile up against the rest of my quilt, it really stuck out. So I'm going to offer the suggestion of picking the color. Um, that you want to use and rolling with it. So because I only have a little bit of that dark blue, that's where I'm going to head. I'm going to go to the dark blue for those long sections and going directly to my block, my tile, and allowing that ink to be its true color for this outside fabric. So whatever speaks to you for your bands or your border, I should say, that's what you should do. Grab a completely different color. That would be fine as well. All right. Once I get that edge inked up, that border inked up, you see this white that's kind of sticking out from the decal of our tile. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that. I don't want those white edges to show when I place my quilt, when I piece my quilt together. So I'm just going to go ahead and on the side of my tile, take that marker right to the side and get rid of that white. That white has such a loud voice when everything else is colored. And I know that anybody that knows me is going to be really shocked by what I'm saying, but I really love the white pop of those corners. So I'm going to let those white corners speak this week, which leads us to our stitching. As I always say, right now, it's just a Zia. And it's not until we get to that stitching point or stitching part where we piece these pieces, where we stitch these pieces officially together, that it makes it a quilt. So this piece can't be ignored. Here we go. Again, I'm using the same dark gray this week. Usually we tangle in our light gray, but the tingles just got completely lost in these colors. So dark gray it is. I'm going to go ahead and stitch all the way around each one of those stripes, being real deliberate and intentional with each one of those stitches. Now our empire is a little bit busy in that stripe, and our stitching may get a little lost, but I promise you that you'll see enough of it that your brain will piece it all together. So don't give up on the stitching portion. Even stitching over the lines of our Broadway, when you pull your tile away, you'll see the broader strokes of those real staccato stitches. Being mindful, taking your time, trying to avoid those thread tails, which would never happen, right? So, real short, crisp lines representing our hand stitched pieces to these blocks. So, if you have a wonky, unstraight, stitched line, that's okay because it was stitched by hand with love. Drop those shoulders down away from your ears, offering yourself a breath. And then I'm going to stitch that border. And you're going to think that this is for knot because you can't really see the stitch marks over that dark blue if that's the color you chose. But just when you think that you can't see it, change that perspective after you have two of the borders done. And where that lighter line falls, or where you're going to see the glisten of those stitches. So don't sell the process short by stopping at this border. So there we have it. New York. What a great addition to our quilt. Thank you ever so much. Go ahead and offer yourself gratitude and appreciation for allowing yourself this creative opportunity, and know that I appreciate you. Until next time.